And greetings and welcome to BRC and Friends, a regular 30-minute Google Hangout with me, Bruce Reyes-Chow, where I chat with friends and adventurers from around the interwebs. Today I welcome Reverend Dr. Grace Jusun Kim. Welcome, Grace.
Thank you so much.
Grace is, good to have you. Grace is the visiting researcher at Georgetown University. She's the author of many books. It seems like every time I turn around there's a new book that she has written. But just a few are Theological Reflections on Gangnam Style, a Racial, Sexual, and Cultural Critique, Contemplations from the Heart, Spiritual Reflections on Family, Community, and the Divine, and the Holy Spirit, Cheah and the Other, a Model of Global and Intercultural Pneumatology. It is safe to say that Reverend Dr. Kim is really smart. Her latest project that was really interesting, which we'll talk about today in a minute, called Reflections Along the Journey, Theological Narratives of Korean American Clergywomen, and she is also ordained teaching elder in the Presbyterian Church USA. Before we jump in, please take a moment to check out all the links that we have kind of below. They're kind of all over the place there. Tweet along with us, B. Reyes-Chow, Grace J-I-S-U-N Kim, and use the hashtag BRC and Friends. As usual, our time is broken up into 3 segments. The first, it's centered around the interests and passions of my guest. The second, we'll talk about a current event or two. And finally, I ask my 5 questions that have come up by my kids and family. So let's go ahead and start. Grace, if you could tell us kind of where you are and give us a little more bio other than you write a lot of books.
Well, thank you again for inviting me. I really appreciate. I think social media is a wonderful tool to kind of talk about the gospel and be engaged in ministry with the world. So thank you so much for this opportunity to come on and to be with you and to chat with you this afternoon. I'm living in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and I'm visiting researcher at Georgetown. So besides writing books, I'm also writing some posts for here and there, blogs on things that I'm interested in or things that have kind of been percolating in my mind. So those are the things I'm doing at the present moment. And I'm also, guest preaching at churches and doing church events, etc. So my life is very busy at this moment.
So when do you sleep? I mean, it seems like you are doing all kinds of stuff all over the place. What are some of the other things that kind of keep you busy these days? I mean, we'll get into the book project in a minute, but how do you stay sane? I think that's a good thing.
I've got the 3 kids, so they're keeping me busy. They're also busy with activities such as soccer and basketball and ballet and jazz, that half my time is just driving them around. So just keeping up with the schedule is a big headache in itself. And I thought once the kids started school, it'd be less driving around, but it's now the weekends and everything else in between. So that's keeping me very, very busy. And every time I wake up in the morning, I feel like I haven't slept enough. That's a
I hear you. I have 3 kids myself. We could probably do whole shows on how do you just navigate and organize carpool chauffeurs, make sure they eat, sleep. Anyway, so let's get back to what it seems like our not tiring work is not the family. It's all the other stuff we do. So you're working on this project that I think is really interesting. Tell me how this book came about. We'll talk about the funding piece, but also just how did it come about to do a collection around Korean American clergywomen? How did that piece happen for you?
Just to give some background, the Korean American clergywomen, next year we're celebrating 25th anniversary. So, they have an annual retreat every year. It's an annual retreat kind of / conference every year in May or June. And so Korean American clergywomen gather together, often with a guest speaker or some theme involved for that year. So a few years back, maybe about 5 years ago, we were at the annual conference meeting, and I suggested, well, they had always wanted to kind of have a book together to kind of record their history, record something, their legacy, so that people will remember from years to come. So I got excited about that, and one other member got excited, so we were going to do it. And then it just got pushed aside, so nothing happened. But then last summer or last spring, the topic came up again. Since that meeting about 5 years ago, we have now set up a board group. So we have board members, around 10 members, are part of the Korean American Clergy Women's Board, and I'm part of that board. And then we were talking about how we can celebrate our 25 years. You know, that 25 years is a big milestone, so some suggested, why don't we go to Korea, why don't we do something special? And we do have some exciting ideas. But then the topic of putting a book together came up again, and I've kind of volunteered that I will edit the piece together. So that's where we are at this point.
That was your first mistake, wasn't it? Volunteering to edit this. So it's basically, I'm trying to, as I looked at the picture, and well, the link is below. Everybody needs to make sure they check out the link. I was looking at this, and I recognized quite a few of the women in that picture. And, I was trying to think, gosh, if I try to gather a bunch of my friends to try to organize a book, because you kind of have to be strict with them too. Like, they have to get stuff to you, and then you have to edit it and get it back. Without, I don't want to know all the ins and outs, but how has that been so far? Just in terms of trying to work with colleagues and all that, and, again, just share what you will, but I bet that's both exciting and frustrating and all of that.
Yeah, it's a bit of both. It's a very interesting project. I already edited one volume before, and I'm actually editing another one, volume 2 of that first one, called Reimagining with Christian Doctrines. So I had some editing kind of background, but this is a little different. It's not so much an academic piece. It's more for the church. It's more for those who are in the laity or thinking of actually going into ministry. It's kind of a book of encouragement of some of the struggles that Korean American clergy women have gone through. And I know all the writers and the contributors, so that makes it a little different. And, when the deadlines come, it's a little harder. But anyway, it's coming together, and all the pieces are now in. A few are still in the editing process, but most of it's in. And we asked Reverend Dr. Neil Pressa to write the foreword, so he submitted his, thankfully. And Reverend Lauren Leibniz is writing the epilogue for it, and she submitted. So it's all coming together. If you had asked me months ago, it was a bit more challenging, but we're almost near the end, but the last bit is still a bit more to go. So anyway, once it's done, I think the writers especially, some of them are first-time writers or published writers, so they should be very happy with what they were able to kind of reflect on or submit to the book. So it's a very exciting project. Right. And something that, future clergy women can look at and be happy that older people like us were able to pull this off and put it together.
Great. Well, I can imagine, I've had friends ask me if I'd be part of something, and I always tell them, I will frustrate you to death, and just know that coming out, because that's just me. But anyway, so I'm glad you're doing that. Again, I'm looking forward to kind of seeing what folks are going to say. I think it's important. Now, this is an interesting thing, though, because you are funding this. You're kind of in this kind of combining both a self-publishing, crowdsourcing, and a traditional publisher. So so Judson is publishing it, but you're helping to build some of the funding around it and building the buzz around it, really. How did that part come about?
Well, it's a very narrow niche, the book is. It's just Korean American women, and Judson Press had asked if we can open up to Asian American women or women of color. And, it's something that, anytime you're trying to publish something with a publisher, there's a lot of negotiating, there's a lot of conversation. So a lot of things were talked about and shared with the board and with the Korean American clergy women. And at the end of the day, they really just wanted Korean American women's voices in the book. They didn't want to really expand it. If we had expanded it, I think there's a larger, or what publishers think is a larger market, and so you can sell tons more books than if it was such a narrow market just aimed at Korean American rather than Asian American or women of color. And they've said for other projects so narrow like this, they've had other Asian American organizations or societies funding them for the book project. And so we had kind of looked around who can kind of fund this, and then they decided to do the crowdsourcing where we would just go public and ask for support for this project, which will help offset some of the publishing costs. So that's how it came about. You know, it's a lot of work on both sides, well, particularly on me, to kind of make sure that we do have the funds to launch this book.
Right. Well, this is, I think it's one of those interesting things. As you know, I've done both ends of that, and it's like you're asking friends and family to give you money, basically, which is always a very odd thing to do. But in some ways, because there's so many authors, I think you should, every one of the authors should also be like, hey, I'm going to be in this. You should help fund this, because I know. Again, the first mistake was volunteering to organize this, I think. But again, it sounds like really important work. Now, when are you hoping to have it completed, and when will we be able to buy it, I guess would be the question.
Okay, so the fundraising ends in about 30 days. So those who want to still contribute have 30 days to go onto the website and contribute to help launch it. And I'm thankful that some of the contributors have already donated money, and friends and just people who have heard about it, they've donated money. So we're about 28% funded. We still have about 70% more to go. So hopefully we'll reach that. The book is going to be both an ebook and a hard paperback copy. The ebook should be available next fall around October, and then the hard copy should be out latest by November. So, with any of those fundraising, you get rewards. So part of the donations, if you match one of the donations, you'll be getting the hard copy and the ebook as a reward for helping supporting this book.
Right. Well, that's great. Well, cool. Well, I'm looking forward to it. I will certainly help to kind of get the word out, and this will hopefully get some of that out there. Yeah. So let's move on. So I always like to talk with folks about other things that they either have passions about or are interested in, because I think one of the things in our world, we one-dimensionalize ourselves and do to others, and so I think it would be easy for people to say, oh, Grace, she's the academic who writes these amazing books, and I always laugh, folks who hold their PhDs, I have the greatest respect for, but often I'll read dissertations, and I'm like, I don't even know what the words are separately, let alone when you put them together. But you managed to, you're prolific. It's amazing. But that's not all who you are, right? That's not just who you are. And we had talked a little bit about some things that you're all interested in. And so you're working on some climate change things with the World Council of Churches. Can you talk a little bit about that interest of yours and that passion?
Yeah, so, we're more than one dimension. So I have a lot of passions, and much of the writing that I've done is about racism or sexism. But the other work that I'm very excited about is climate change or climate justice. And so I've been part of the climate change working group for the World Council of Churches. And, that's very exciting for me there too, that we can kind of work for climate justice and getting all the churches involved. About a year and a half ago, the World Council of Churches decided that they will now put more focus on climate change and climate justice. The working group is about 20 years old. I've kind of joined only 2 years ago. But I think, when I think about my kids, and I'm actually writing another Huffington Post as we're speaking. I run every morning, and Monday mornings is garbage day. And when I run around the neighborhood on garbage day, you kind of have to cringe because of all the garbage that's by the roadside. It's amazing what people throw away. I think people in North America throw away more stuff than maybe other people around the world. I know Europeans are more conscious about garbage and about the environment. Just by looking at what the churches are doing in Europe and in parts of Asia and Africa, people are more conscious about it. But I think in North America, we kind of live in this kind of disposable society where we just kind of throw away, you use it once, and if you're bored with it or because it's disposable, you can throw it away, or you can just buy a better TV or a better I don't know, better technology, technological gadgets. So you just kind of tend to throw it away, and you see that as, you know, as I run around Monday morning, it just bothers me. So this is a very important issue for me because, you know, what are we going to leave behind the next generation? I've got 3 kids. They're going to inherit all the problems that we adults have created thus far and are continuing to create. And I think the churches are not exempt from this problem. Sometimes we are part of the problem. We're doing, you know, we're doing a lot of harm, and on top of it, we're not really speaking out for climate justice. So I think the church is a long way to go, and it's exciting to be working with the World Council of Churches. And actually, at the last meeting in Germany this past May, I volunteered to edit a book there too. So I got.
I'm sensing a pattern.
So I'm swamped with editing right now, just trying to put that together, and that's another challenge in itself. In that, you know, it's a bunch of people from around the world where they're not English-speaking people, and, you know, translations need to be done. You got to edit the proper English. So that's another challenge in itself. But once it's done, I'll be happy. So every book is very challenging, but I think at the end of the day, when it's done, I'll be happy with it. But that is one climate change issue that I'm very excited about doing and continue to do. And I think it's a long haul to kind of work for stewardship and make climate change a very important topic for us today. The next actually climate change meeting that the World Council of Churches is putting together is coming up in 2 weeks in September 17, 18, 19, just before the United Nations Climate Change Summit. The United Nations is only inviting some heads of state so that they can talk about climate change and climate justice and what the governments and head of states need to do to kind of have sustainability. So the World Council of Churches is holding a meeting. We're only inviting 30 people, religious people of faith to come together. It will be an interreligious dialogue, so not only Christian groups, but other religious groups will be invited, so we can talk about climate change and sustainability. And also at the same time, Union Theological Seminaries. So all of this is happening in New York City. Union Theological Seminary that same weekend is having Religions for the Earth in conjunction with Green Faith and with World Council of Churches. So all these meetings are happening in 2 weeks' time to raise consciousness. The Union Theological Seminary conference will invite 200 people, religious leaders around the country, and some international leaders to come in and be part of this conference to talk about how we are to work towards sustainability and saving the earth and climate justice, and how we are to take care of the environment, the planet, and each other. So those 3 events are happening in a couple of weeks. So that should be very, very exciting for many people, and I'm excited. I'll be part of that event. So I'm looking forward to that.